What up, everybody? We are back with another episode of Dice It Up on the Her Hoop Stats podcast. We are thrilled to welcome an incredible guest, incredible basketball mind, phenomenal media talent, great friend, Maria Marino. Just so thankful that you've carved out time on your Tuesday afternoon to spend with us. Staple of the Northeast sports market. Don't work at SNY, covering every sport, but dealt a lot with the WNBA with the Liberty, the UConn Huskeis, who are a pretty good basketball team, and ended up taking your talents to Action Network, where you are now, doing amazing work there on Green Dot Daily every day, hosting the Buckets podcast, doing men's and women's basketball. So happy to get you on to talk with us.
Okay, that might be the most epic introduction in the history of my media appearances, but it's an absolute pleasure. I'm so excited to meet Ice for the first time, and I'm happy to join a friend in Geno who has been a regular on the aforementioned Buckets podcast.
Oh yeah, we're loving that. I love how somehow Ice has always has some connection to a guest we have, like down the road, and of course it's Brendan Glasheen, who still does play-by-play for the Connecticut Sun, Ice's old work husband. Also does work at Action Network, so it's all connecting. We love shouting him out. He'll be on the call, I assume, tonight. I don't think it's a national TV game, so you'll be hearing this, I guess, on August 2nd. Right. But Maria, like, you have done like almost too much, and I remember reading like the Forbes piece that Howard did, and I was like, oh my god, like I wish I had this motivation to work that hard at anything in my life. But take me back to where the love for sports all started, from young Maria to where you are now.
Well, the love for sports and then the media side of it were sort of two different things that eventually came together in my life to mold into what I'm doing now. But I mean, I loved playing sports as a kid. Both my parents were athletic. They both played basketball actually for rival high schools. So they never met each other because like when their teams were playing, like obviously like girls are home, guys are away, but they eventually met later on as adults. And you know, my older siblings played ball. In fact, my older sister was probably the best out of my three older siblings, and I used to love going to her games. Basketball is the first sport I learned to play, and it's still my favorite sport to cover. And so it was a family affair watching, and then later on, I discovered journalism. I was always like a storyteller, always loved to write. And then as a junior in high school, took a journalism class and kind of realized like, this is what I want to pursue as a career. I was lucky that I figured that out like pretty early, and, became the editor, and then went into college, and that sort of morphed into, hey, I have no issue sort of presenting myself. Like I didn't care about public speaking. I liked the interactions with people, doing interviews and all that. And so it morphed into, on air, on camera. So that's where it all started.
Love that. Yeah. I mean, I see you probably have a similar situation, but you had to go to like 6 different schools, of course, to end up at a.
Yeah, Maria, you figured it out your junior year of high school. I figured out my junior year of college at my second school. But honestly, it was just like the Syracuse Newhouse Mafia that was thrown onto me that I just could not escape. But I love that. I want to ask you about, since you were so driven in broadcasting, like at a young age, being in high school, how have you crafted like your development, since you've kind of known what you wanted to do? You've maybe had some goals from a very young age. So how have you crafted out your development through the rest of your high school, through the rest of college, and then obviously that first major job at SNY?
Well, that job at SNY did not come swiftly. I always joke with people, my first full-time job was at 29 years old, because before that, it was just years of grinding and working multiple part-time and freelance gigs. And I feel like there was definitely a flip that switched when I realized that sports was the area that I wanted to focus on. Because when I was in college, I mean, I wrote for like high school sports for our local paper and did like cover like local football and basketball games for like high schools and stuff like that. But when I was actually interning at ABC7 in New York, and my mentor there at the time, she's still a reporter there for 7 on Your Side, Nina Pineda. She said to me, like, she heard me talking about the Giants one day, and she was like, you need to be covering sports. And I was like, I never thought it was realistic. I couldn't visualize like a path. And sure enough, I always say my famous phrase is like, there's no blueprint in this industry that you can follow. It's really just a winding path that you have to just go step by step and see where it leads. And you have to be open to a lot of things. So, I mean, I covered lifestyle stuff. I did local news reporting and anchoring for a radio station. And then, a couple of high school buddies had this sports podcast that they started for fun, asked me to come on. And all of a sudden it hit me like, this is really what I love. And then I pursued it from there. And my first sports gig was in radio at Sirius XM. Through doing that, I was able to network and kind of find other gigs and branch out, and worked at NBC Sports Radio, eventually worked at a company called Fantasy Sports Network, which is now Sports Grid, which was my first regular on camera thing. And then did enough work where SNY saw it and invited me to freelance. I freelanced for 9 months, including a stint covering 8 men's college games. And that was Dan Hurley's first year. So super for him, happy for him that he has come full circle and got a championship, which is what he went there to do. And then the following year, I became full-time at SNY. Started covering the women's side, which I adored. And that was 4 years. And now, as Dano mentioned, a new chapter at Action Network, but not closing the door on all the other things that I'm interested in.
Shout out to you and the grind. I love it. I know it all too well, just as an athlete and then getting into this business. But, often we see the U's on TV, right? We see the Brendans and like the bigger, higher names. And we think that like they were so good right away. And then someone just plopped them on TV and that was it. And we don't really hear about the backstories of the 6, 7, 8 years of freelance and trying to find consistent work. So shout out to you for the grind. That's awesome.
I would just like to add too, Ice, I feel like you and I are somewhat like opposite, right? Like you knew the sports side. Like, I'm going to be an athlete. I'm going to like, for me, I was like I said, I didn't see the sports thing as super realistic, even from a media standpoint. And I was like, I know I like journalism. I know this is for me. And so then later kind of embraced that like I do belong in the sports space. So kind of like juxtaposing journeys there.
Yeah, definitely. Because when I entered college, I knew that I wanted to do public speaking. And I tell everyone that I thought I was going to be a spokesperson for a huge company. Like I was going to be a spokesperson for Coca-Cola and go around the world and do their little presentations and sell stuff. And that's literally what my plan was until I figured out like, oh, I can talk about sports for a living. And now I'm in the best thing ever.
And by the way, I would just like to say too, that things change and that's totally fine. Like if you could have one goal and, have something else happen in your life where it changes your priorities. And that doesn't mean like you're a failure if, you don't end up getting a job in, the major that you studied in college or whatever. And what I've just embraced is that, like I said, just a lot of twists and turns. And, sometimes a phrase that I say sometimes is like, sometimes your dream shows up in a form you don't expect. So just kind of being open to like what life throws at you and understanding that that could actually be better than you ever imagined.
I love that. Oh my gosh, come on, life coach. Look, you got me ready to like go chase something else.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, I hope nobody from EY hears this, but I'm like, so ready to quit my job. Anyway, But
we'll discuss the plan after.
yes. But
Oh my gosh.
so obviously one of the most premier programs in the history of sport,
Yes.
UConn women's basketball, like the pictures of you and Geno, and then the videos of you and Geno just standing together. It looks like best friends with such a professional relationship. Like Geno to me is like Godfather-esque, but like hilarious, like incredible storyteller.
Yeah.
His press conferences are so long. His pauses are incredible. I love just listening to him go. What was that like building that relationship with him?
Man, you really started to paint a pretty accurate picture, I think, because the thing with Geno is like it's nuanced with him. You're right. Whenever I was interviewing him, even though I felt like we had a good rapport, and he has an excellent sense of humor, and I appreciate that, I was always trying to be truly professional because the respect is so great. And I hope that he realized that I think sometimes I tried a little too hard to do a good job, and I needed to just be more real and not worry so much about perfection. But I think if anyone can relate to that, it's him, because he is all about chasing perfection. But, you mentioned like his long press conferences. I always say he's incredibly generous with his time.
Yeah.
For somebody who is incredibly in demand, he puts thought into every question, and he gives everyone the time of day. And I always felt like he went above and beyond that what he really needed to. He understood the role. He has understood the role of media and how, telling these stories can help advance the sport. And so I just loved being around him. I kind of just cherished every moment because he's always saying something meaningful. He's always telling a story. You can always learn something. You're entertained by him for sure. And just even traveling with SNY, and, you would come across the team, like in the hotel or whatever, we come across him, he'd stop, he'd say hello to the crew. He would tell us stories. And I just, like, every single moment, I just tried to like hang on his every word, because I know those opportunities don't come around too often. And I will greatly miss being around the program, like on such a regular basis. Like I said, I know I'm going to be around because, I'm not going anywhere as far as like covering women's basketball. And so I'm kind of excited, like how can that relationship evolve? But yeah, just being around that program, not just him, the other coaches who are extremely accomplished in their own rights, all like previous head coaches or associate head coach Chris Daly, who's also a Hall of Famer, like just sort of seeing their process, watching the athletes, like just going to shoot arounds before the games, and just seeing the attention to detail. Like they're very impressive to me with everything that they have on their plates, to perform with like the challenges that they have in front of them with social media and just staying focused. Always just like respected them a ton. And I just can't wait to see their continued development. The players that I've covered, seeing them develop in the WNBA, and also the current players that are still at UConn. I'm so excited for this year. I'm not going to lie. I cannot wait to see the return of Paige. I think she's stellar. And some of the other players too, like Ice, Brady. So yeah, like big fan. I'm not going to front anymore. Like I always covered the team and I tried to be as objective as possible, but like just being around the program, like I just feel like you can't help but be a fan of the greatness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed it very quickly, like at in Hoboken at the bar during their game against Ohio State. You were absolutely glued to that screen.
Well, when I wasn't yelling at the bartenders for changing the channel, it was a very frustrating day because there were like we were at the Action Network March Madness watch party, and this bar in Hoboken is like, you have like literally like 200 TVs on, and like somehow the one TV that's playing the women's tournament is like, you know, switching all the time. And I'm like going from TV to TV, and then it's like on the one crappy TV. I was like very, very frustrated, but that was a pretty heartbreaking loss. I mean,
yeah, it was tough.
Breaking the streak of 14 straight Final Fours. And I, you know, I wasn't obviously there. I did get to, it's not really like a pleasure, but like it's just like, it's so historically significant when UConn loses anything.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I think we had a record of like their games on SNY. It was like over 100 straight games they won on SNY. And then there were a couple like, oh no, like there were a couple losses this year. It was like so crazy.
Oh yeah.
So, but they've obviously dealt with an unprecedented amount of injuries in the past 2 years.
Yeah, for sure. Maria, I wanted to ask you, working with a team day in and day out, where you, like you said, you become part of like their inner circle. What is the best way that younger broadcasters can just build a rapport? I feel like through my time, just, you know, in the WNBA, in college basketball, that's something that always young broadcasters ask me, like, hey, like, I want to continue to cover this team. I want to continue to cover this coach. Like, how do I get access? How do I build those relationships where they trust me with information to represent their team in a positive lighting? And since you did it so well with the Liberty, with UConn, I wanted to ask you your perspective on just how you built such a good rapport and relationships with those players.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the kind words, but secondly, I think it starts with having the right motivation and just genuinely caring. Like, I care about those athletes, those coaches as people. And I really go into any sort of interview and like, I am putting my wants and needs 100% aside. And I'm not trying to sound self-righteous. I just go in and I focus on them because the story is about them. And I think sometimes, you know, in broadcasting, the story can kind of become about you and your career and how do you get ahead. And to me, that's the wrong motivation, because if you focus on the story in front of you, all of those other things with your own career are going to sort of organically follow. So I just think that if you show that you care and you show the respect and you're, you know, careful with how you do everything. I mean, again, I'm maybe a little too careful, but with my reports, like I was so meticulous about like, if they said something a certain way, I'm not mincing their words. Like I am using direct quotes, or I am being clear that what I'm saying is something from my mouth and not their mouth. Like just really being mindful of your words, your stories, and how they're being reflected. And also being respectful of time, I think, is a big one. And even in something as basic, not basic because it's hard, a lot harder than people think, but like a sideline interview, like something as so small as taking your question and cutting it in half. Like if you can ask the same question in fewer words, I think it's a very small thing that not only makes, in my opinion, the broadcast run smoother and be more like engaging, right, but also I think the players and coaches appreciate it when you are being intentional and you are like mindful of their time. Like I'm not trying to sit here and talk for 30 seconds and then get your answer. Like I want to hear from you. The audience wants to hear from the coaches. The audience wants to hear from the players. So like get to the point, I think is like a really big lesson. And that comes from the quick preparation prior to those interviews. And that's what I mean. Like, it's a lot harder than people think or how it looks on TV. Is like, I know, like, I figure out those questions beforehand, right? Which isn't always easy because especially if it's a close game. I've had, I think, 2 UConn games that were like within a point, and I'm like simultaneously coming up with a pair of questions for you know, Geno and a pair of questions for the other team's head coach. And it's not easy, but it's like kind of have an idea of where you're going before you get there, so that those interviews can be very efficient. But that's obviously more of a game day thing. But I think just to your greater question, it's more of a day in, day out, just respecting their time, respecting them, and making sure it's about them.
I love that answer. Thank you.
Yeah, that's so real. I mean, it definitely goes back to what you're saying. It's not about you. It's about them and telling a story. I mean, I definitely feel anxiety whenever like somebody has to do a sideline report or talk to a coach mid-game and things aren't going well. I'm like, God.
Can I just also say, I wish that I could like have a conference with some TV producers. This might make me sound arrogant, but can like the interviews at the end of quarters? No, like
I mean, have you seen the WNBA now doing it like mid beginning of second and fourth quarter?
Like, with all due respect to ESPN, and their broadcast is legendary, and I think the commentators, I mean, Ruocco and Lobo and Holly Rowe are absolutely fantastic. But I hate when the reporters, including Holly, are put in sort of like positions where they like have over interviews. Like, I don't know, sometimes I find myself watching games, and whether it's NCAA tournament games or whatever, where it's like, let this coach go talk to their team. Let this player go talk to their team. Like, I think in general, I think sometimes sideline interviews can be a little bit too forced, which is, you know, some people probably wouldn't like me saying that, especially in the industry. But I just think, again, with keeping the player and coach comfort and in mind, like keep the interview to like after the half, after the game. That's just my personal preference.
Yeah, I think a substitute to that is like huddle reports, right? Like if we as sideline reporters get more huddle access, or there's a mic'd up huddle, then it's like, okay, hey, we can go back and play this wired 30 seconds, right? We only normally see that in the NBA, honestly, where that's like a constant, you know, piece of content that we're getting. But if that becomes something that we get, then it's like, okay, cool. End of first quarter, going to the second quarter. Hey, here's what was in the huddle, guys. Here's what they're focusing on. Then sideline reporter can add to that.
Ice, that's a really great point. And huddle reports to me are some of the most riveting content you can get, because it's one of the few things that the audience doesn't have access to. And, you know, the whole point of sideline reporting is to tell the audience something that they don't know or that they can't find just Googling. Or, you know, every report that I've done, it's been through a conversation with a player or coach that was just told to me. And it's hard to do. It's maybe something that's not always achievable.
Yeah.
But I'll say this, can't tell you how many times I would be on the sideline straining to hear the huddle. Like, I would try to get as close as I possibly could without being too like in people's space and like being too rude. And I'm like trying to read Geno's lips. And like if I got one huddle report in a game, great. Yeah. If I got two, like killing it, right? But also a lot of times, like the only time you can hear the huddle report, you know, something in the huddle is when the coach is pissed off or like has a reason to raise their voice that you can actually hear, because, you know, especially at a place like UConn and now with the WNBA, with, you know, audience is growing.
Yep.
It gets loud in those arenas. So it's not always easy to do, but I agree with you.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like my best huddle reports have come before coaches have entered the huddle, when the players have been discussing. So when it's that first one, they sit down and the players are like, you know, whether it's like AT and she's like, hey guys, we got to make sure that we take care of the ball, or Manhattan College is one of the teams that I cover, and it's one of the players coming in and saying, hey, right now we're not at our standard we need to be at. Yes. And it's always nice for the audience to hear, like, from players' perspectives, right? We hear about coaches all the time. We interview coaches, you see them. But to know that there are player-led huddles and what their information is, have been like my best huddle reports. But I hear you, what you're saying on like the mid-quarter, like end of quarter interviews. And especially when in terms of respecting time, like, yes, it's tough, right? Like there's not much time there already. And so adding that interview is like, I don't know.
It's really hard to generate something that's actually going to add value to the broadcast. And sometimes and also, how about this? If you want to do that, fine. Keep it to one question.
Right.
Or maybe one follow-up.
Yep.
I don't need a 3-question interview
For
at
sure.
that time. But anyway, I'm ranting. I'm be doing my
No,
media
no.
thing.
Oh, I love it.
It
I love it.
it's always funny when Brendan's talked about it. Like you definitely can relate. I think like Kim Adams from covering the Big East, but like once y'all have been in it, like it's wild that the perspective you have watching, y'all immediately think about production, and it's just like we as fans and people who aren't in that life are just like, oh, final product. We're not thinking about the logistical aspects that go into it. So it's always fun to hear about that.
I got another gripe for you while I'm on my soapbox. I sometimes watch these games. I tweeted about this during the NCAA tournament. I don't know if it's an arena thing or a production thing, but some of the angles of these games, and I noticed in the W season too, every time I
Mystics games,
it looks, I'm sorry, it looks bad. The angle looks, it's like too angular.
Up top, too bird eye.
I'm looking down, and I noticed that, I think it was at maybe a Wings game recently. I
Mystics for sure. Mystics every time.
Off-putting. It's an off-putting view, and like that's gotta tighten up. Like, I'm sorry, more and more people are watching these games, and we're breaking records in terms of viewership. We need to get the production quality up to snuff. And again, I know some of these arenas are challenging. I worked at the Washington Mystics arena when UConn played Georgetown, and I remember there were some challenges to it. I want to actually go back and pull tape from that game on SNY to see if the angle was as off-putting as I've noticed of late. But I'm sorry. I want the product to shine because the product is so good. Like, let's make sure we put it in the best light. Yeah. Anyway, 100%. I am really on one at,
No, I mean, but to kind of segue into, a point you're talking about the growth and viewership. And I mean, we spoke recently about, the numbers put up in the Final Four, what ESPN's doing with these WNBA games. What to you, in your mind, being around the game and being around media has been, some of the driving factors in that? I mean, obviously, like, my mind immediately points to betting, to social media, the ability for brands to utilize athletes, pay these athletes in college that are, huge. We're seeing women's basketball players being paid more than, men's football players, which is awesome to see. But it's incredible. So what do you think are some of the biggest aspects in the growth of the game?
Well, I think it all starts with media coverage in general. And I have noticed a huge amount of growth in the awareness of, in particular, WNBA and women's college basketball and women's sports across the board. But those are sort of the areas that I specialize in. And I started covering WNBA in 2018. And at that time, there were about 2 writers that I knew of who actually covered the game. It was M.A. Vopel and Howard Megdal. And in the years since, I've noticed more and more writers, more and more bloggers, more and more websites, more traditional media actually allocating reporters to the beats, just more information in general. And I'm super happy with that progression. Obviously, there's a ways to go. Social media, the conversation has changed a lot. It can still be toxic at times, with mostly insecure males, trying to hate on the product, but they're just ignorant. But for the most part, I'll say this, like, again, like back 2018 to now is like night and day in terms of the social media conversation. I notice a lot more respectful discourse. I notice just a lot more education, and a lot more openness. And like I said, I think it starts with the media coverage. And I know in my own personal stops along my career journey, I've made sure to find opportunities where maybe it was assumed or an oversight or not necessarily something people would do to like mention WNBA or mention whoever. I was like, hey, like, let's like throw that in there, and did a lot of badgering, which I am not at all sorry for. And, so it's just in a such better place. And then I think the things that you mentioned in terms of like NIL betting, those are more like supplement now. And it's certainly helping matters. I'm a fan of however you discover the game. Hold on, I need water.
All good.
I'm talking your ears off. Like however you discover the game, I'm all for it. So if that's because you like to bet and that's where you can get some action and you like basketball, like to me, if you understand the game of basketball, you will turn on that game maybe because you have a bet on it and you will look and see like, hey, like this is dope. And then as far as NIL, look, NIL is big for all college athletes, but it has especially helped level the playing field for women's college athletes, women's athletes in general, because typically if you go professional as a women's athlete, you're not paid to the level of a men's athlete. So to be able to earn some money off of your hard work as a college student, that helps you financially. It also helps your brand. And what we're seeing is like just the versatility of women and like just the multifaceted nature of them. Sometimes people say like, oh, like this person only got that NIL deal because they're good looking or they're hot or whatever. And it's like, no, like if you actually look, like the top NIL earners, especially on the women's basketball side, for the most part, are the best players in the game.
Yeah.
Like I said, for the most part. And so like, this is all good. Like this is all good. And I just think for so many years, sometimes traditionalists complain too about like the transfer portal. I'm all for it. I know it can get dicey, but one, it makes it more interesting, right? How much more interesting is NBA and WNBA when we have free agency and we have like people landing where we don't expect? Number two, coaches could previously leave with no consequence. And meanwhile, the players that they recruited would get left behind. And you're asking somebody, we talked about this earlier in the conversation, Ice, of like knowing what you're going to do at a young age. It's really hard. And you're asking, teenagers to make a college decision, and hopefully they make the right one. But it's not always a fit. And it's not always because they're giving up on it. I think that used to be a stigma of like transferring, like, oh, like, why didn't you work there? Like, what's wrong with you? And it's like, sometimes it's just not the right fit. And athletes should get a chance to make the most of their years of eligibility. And so, yeah, I like where, college athletics have evolved to, and I'm happy for these athletes that they are seeing some dividends from, their commitment, because certainly the colleges and the NCAA, we're seeing them all along.
Yeah, for sure. I think you raised a good point about the transfer portal. I think the only group that is affected negatively by the transfer portal are high schools, like seniors in high school, because you're coming into a program knowing that in an instant, you can find anyone that is either more experienced than you, just more experience, and having a year of college, understanding the discipline and the time management that it comes with. But what I will say with NIL right now is that it is outshining the W. Like women's college basketball is soon going to outshine the W. Mark my word, especially if the W does not allow players younger than 22 to be in the draft. So right now, that's the W's rule, is that you've got to be 22 and in order to enter the draft. Yeah. And so there are the questions of the superstars that become like the Paige Beckers, probably without an injury, or the Caitlin Clarks right now, that if there was no rule for that, the Angel Reeses of the world, could they take their ability right now and go be in the W and take all of their NIL deals and now make them actual contract deals and then raise the level of the bar in the W? My concern with the W right now is that if expansion doesn't happen soon and you don't lower the age of players that can enter the draft, women's college basketball is going to become like the major thing. We're going to see players doing 6-7 years on purpose because they'd rather stay in college than get to the next level.
Like how's that possible? 6-7 years on purpose.
Listen, I could redshirt an ankle sprain if I really wanted to, and still be the most popular person on my team on the sideline. If Angel Reese decided this year, like, I'm not playing, I've got a stress fracture that can't heal, do you think she would stop her TurboTax commercial?
Valid.
Listen, I want to respond to what you said, because I think you raised so many great points. The key to everything you said there is expansion.
Yeah.
When you mention expansion, that's when you can start exploring lowering the draft age, because we have an overabundance of talent and not enough space. But I also think that expansion is going to be, from a business standpoint, how you actually grow, because you need to be in more than 12 markets for the awareness piece. And look, I'm not gonna lie, even before NIL, let's be honest, women's college basketball has gotten more shine in a lot of respects than the W. And I think that's just, a product of the college fan bases are really strong and they're loyal. And but seeing those college fan bases, like a UConn, for example, just because I spent a lot of time, in stores in Hartford, and seeing their sellouts all the time, it's like, this is what those W audiences could be. And they're getting there, they're getting there for the cities that they're in. But yeah, you need to expand. And also, there's nothing saying that these companies can't also sign NIL deals with current W athletes. And so they need to look at that. The emergence of college NIL is what sparked everything. So everyone started jumping on colleges. But these athletes deserve endorsements, as professionals, which they could have already been getting. And I think, to your point, the low WNBA salaries is still what's making the college thing a little bit more appealing right now. But they should still be able to get endorsements, and businesses should be recognizing that value. I think they're definitely coming around to that.
Great point. Yeah.
A lot going into it, but
I love it. Before I move on to kind of our last few stuff, I do want to say ICE was transferring before it was cool.
Well, look, you could transfer, but you just had to sit out. Did you?
I was just a rebel who didn't care. 7 years in college basketball just didn't bother me.
So Maria, you're doing incredible work at Action. The fact there's the statistics about how many, or the growth of betting in women's college basketball from year over year. And I think the spotlight that you shined on it at Action throughout the tournament, throughout the regular season is a huge testament. Oh yeah. For sure. It was a joy to come on and talk to someone who's just super knowledgeable about it, up to date. And it's March, and getting the shine on women and understanding this is one of the coolest betting spectacles for the men's side every year. The same attention should be put on the women, but the fact that you are able to switch and talk about every sport and understand different angles, have to know all these different players, different golfers, the most random sports in the world. I just want to say, how do you do it? I feel like the amount of preparation, because it may seem simple to a lot of people to just talk about some betting lines, but to be knowledgeable and do the prep, pronounce names right, it's a lot of work.
Well, yeah, it's hard. And honestly, I want to do a better job. I literally was just having a conversation with the chief content officer at Action Network, Chad Millman, earlier today. And I was saying, look, on the segments that are NBA, WNBA, men's, women's college basketball, NFL, whatever, I'm super strong because I know all of those really well. But then when you start getting to hockey and soccer and golf, it's definitely harder. So it's a little bit less conversational. So I at least try to do the prep, the bare minimum prep to make sure to ask my producer, am I pronouncing this name properly? Make sure I know generally what's going on. I go to people on my production team that I know are stronger in certain sports, and I'll be like, hey, what about this? What about that? So I try. I want to do a little better job of that, but yeah, you can certainly tell. I think the sports that I'm more like locked into. Yeah, it's just the prep. That's all.
Yeah, it's the variety's got to be fun at least. We definitely, our partnership with, or I guess her Hoop Stats basically owning Spread the Floor, loves the partnership with Action Network, loves all the work that you do. I mean, it's so cool to see, women talking about betting. I mean, it's like, so I think it's, kind of like what we talked about earlier. It's really associated with men too often, but women are just, they're allowed to bet as well. And I think the growth is great. And seeing a woman being a face of that is huge.
Well, hold on. I just got excited. I don't think I mentioned this to you. I know we got to wrap soon, but the last time I was at Barclays Center, something happened that has never happened before. I was at a game. I'm on the line for the bathroom, TMI, and there was a girl behind me talking, like explaining like what a total was. And I literally was like, I turned around, I was like, are you talking about sports betting? She was like, yes, I love sports betting. I was like, oh my God. I was like, you gotta like find my podcast buckets, whatever, cause like we've become more accustomed now. It's become more commonplace to see women in front facing roles in sports, like on broadcasts and things like that. And on the executive side of things. But now we got to kind of flip that where we see more women on the sports betting side, because sports betting is still so relatively new that it hasn't quite like caught up with that yet. And obviously if you see a woman talking about it as another woman, you like feel more relatable and you feel like, oh, I could do that too. Or if I like the sport, then chances are I will understand what goes into sports betting. And to me, it just makes it more interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. Simple as that. Like if you see it, you kind of know you can do it, right? Like in the role model way, but also like, yes, I firmly believe I could sports bet and understand if I really wanted to. Yeah. Dan was bringing me along slowly but surely. So are you now. So I'll probably be on it in a couple months.
You, Danielle Avari, friend of the program, has been on here before. Just, shepherds of this, and we love it. We know we got a wrap here. Let's all give out one bold prediction for the rest of the WNBA season. We're halfway through. Start with you, Ice.
Bold prediction. Dallas Wings are going to finish in the top 3.
Oh, it's not that bold.
He never likes my bold.
The other team.
I play it safe. This is why I don't bet, because I play it safe. Go ahead, Maria. What's yours?
That's why, though. I'm selective. So mine's a little bit granular. I was actually having this conversation via text with our colleague Jim Turvey the other day, and I was thinking to myself, is it going to be a different rookie that gets Rookie of the Month for July, like besides Aaliyah Boston? And I thought to myself, if the Lynx keep on this trajectory where they're teams off guard, like could Diamond Miller or Dorka Juhas maybe get into that Rookie of the Year conversation? To be fair, I admit, I think that the Rookie of the Year narrative is too far along that I don't think it's going to sway at this point, because Aaliyah Boston was so dominant in the first half and she was an all-star. So I'm pretty sure she has that in the bag, but the Fever have since kind of the Lynx are kind of going like this. So I'm like, so that's my bold prediction that one of those two will give her a run in the second half at Rookie of the Year.
I love that. I love that so much. Gosh. Yeah. I mean, someone texted me the other day. It's like, why have we not been betting Aaliyah Boston unders? And I'm like, oh, she's really good. Let me look at these stats. Oh, wow. And then you see what Diamond Miller is doing every night. And Dorka.
You made a point, Dano, on the Buckets pod today via Action Network that Aaliyah's not getting the touches. Yeah. Like these rookies on the Lynx are being given the rope by Cheryl Reeve to a lot of minutes, a big role. So, I mean, obviously Aaliyah Boston has a lot of minutes, but you know what I'm saying.
And the other way though, in a basketball simple way, they're guards, right? Like Diamond Miller is a guard. She's touching the ball every single time, whether you like it or not. Aaliyah Boston most of the time has to fight for her touches or get them off an offensive rebound, which is a little harder than we think. So yeah, for
I
sure.
agree. Good point.
Dano, what's your prediction?
I one last thing. If you would have told me that at the end of July that Dorka Juhas was making a game-winning block on the road, I would have called you insane.
Well, she's
and on DB. Oh, it almost hurt me a little.
I mean, like,
development has definitely been significant. You know, she has definitely made, and because she's gotten she's gotten so many chances to play.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to find another angle. I tried to find another team, but it's not happening. Dallas Wings, 2023 WNBA champions over the Aces in 5. They're going to beat the Liberty. It's going to be bad for me. That's my bold prediction. I hope it doesn't happen. I'm a Liberty fan, season ticket holder. I'm proud of them, but as bold as I can be, it's a Wings championship. Plus like 4,000 or something on FanDuel right now. Okay.
All right, I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, we gotta go after that one.
I could see it though. I think that they could get hot enough.
Yeah.
I think they could get hot enough, and the Aces would still torch them by 20 in 2 of the games.
That's probably more accurate. But I could definitely see them beating the Liberty at the moment. They gotta.
They're just they're too weird. They're too different, and it's fun.
Okay.
Maria, thank you so much for joining us today. It was amazing to have you. Could you give everyone your social media handles so everyone can tap into all that you're doing?
Maria Marino is a popular name. So mine has the middle initial. So it's at Maria C. Marino. Thank you so much, guys, for having me on. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Yes, and listen to her every week, Tuesdays and Fridays on the Buckets Pod, presented by Action and Green Dot Daily. She's doing it live. I mean, it's wild to ever be on that show. She's in the zone. It's great. Yes. So Maria, thank you. We'll enjoy some WNBA, everybody.
All right. See you guys.